Lord, bless me.
Even me.
Even me.
Lord.
Lord, bless me.
And or programs in low-income areas. And now with the Trump administration looking to cut Medicaid, access to treatment is going to become even more difficult for those of us who can't afford it. And for those of us who can afford it, finding a mental health professional who looks like us and can relate to our experience has been another barrier. However, despite the barriers, there is still a negative stigma surrounding Black people and mental illness. There is still a negative stigma surrounding Black people engaging in therapy. These stigmas exist in our society, in our families, and perhaps there is no place where these stigmas are more ubiquitous than the church. Historically, the church has reinforced negative stigmas regarding mental illness by silencing, ignoring, and downplaying the suffering of those living with mental health issues. Let me tell you, y'all, I am not too saved, I am not too sanctified to critique the church. I can stand here this morning and acknowledge when the church has not gotten it right. And when it comes to mental health, we have not gotten it right. The things that we say, the cliches that we have, not only stigmatize and marginalize those living with mental illness, but they can also make them feel invisible. As Dr. Monica Coleman mentioned in the video that was played before my sermon, you can be blessed. You can know that you're blessed. You can say that you're blessed. You can recognize God's blessings all around you, and you can still feel stressed. You can still feel depressed. You can still struggle with feelings of sadness, hopelessness, and worthlessness. You can be blessed and still be stressed. So the question that I want to ask today is, how do we deal with this paradox? How do we deal with the paradox of being blessed and still stressed? The paradox of being anointed but still feeling disappointed. The paradox of being saved but still struggling. When I thought about this, I was reminded, Bridget, that God loves paradoxes. God loves to take two things that appear to be contradictory in nature and allow them to exist in the same space. Not only does God love paradoxes, but the Bible is full of them. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first. Whoever would be great must be servant of all. If we want to save our lives, we must lose our lives. Now, not only does God love paradoxes, not only is the Bible full of paradoxes, but God is a paradox. The fact that the omnipotent, omniscient God would choose to enter this world as a weak, frail, insecure human is within itself a paradox. Jesus was both fully human and fully divine. That within itself is a paradox. I received a phone call from a woman who was not a member of our church, and she called me because after her child was born, she was diagnosed with postpartum depression. After 4 months of struggling with postpartum, she decided to go and speak to her minister. The minister prayed with her and told her not to worry because this too shall pass. When she reached out to me, it was because she needed to speak to a woman in ministry, and preferably someone who had children. I fit the bill. So she called me up, and she wanted to know why she was still struggling. Her child had just turned 1, and she was still struggling with postpartum depression. And she wanted to know why, because when she left the meeting with her minister, she believed that her depression had an expiration date. She wanted me to explain to her why God did not allow this to pass.
Now, from the onset, telling someone this too shall pass is not a bad thing. However, we have to be conscious of how our language and the things we say are being heard by those who are struggling. Because the truth of the matter is, we cannot guarantee that this will pass. And we certainly can't guarantee that it will pass in a short period of time. Now, I believe that this woman's minister may have offered different counsel if he understood how postpartum depression works. You see, many people believe that postpartum depression is mommy blues. It's something that happens to a woman after the birth of her baby. However, postpartum depression can last 2 months or it can last 2 years. This brings me to my second point: education and advocacy. We need to be educated about mental health and how it is impacting our lives, the lives of our children, because mental illness in children right now is at an all-time high. The third thing we can do to make the church a safe place is to make mental health a priority. Most adults and children go to their primary care physician at least once a year for an annual checkup, just to make sure that everything regarding our physical health is okay. And if something is not okay, if we have been following up with the doctor and attending regularly, then the chances are we catch whatever's wrong in time to do something about it. It's the same thing with our mental health. We don't want to wait until we have a break before we start addressing our mental health. Just like we go in for physical checkups, we should be going in for mental checkups just to make sure that everything is okay. We lose loved ones. We lose our job. These are all life things that we just sometimes need to go in and check and say, can I just process this? And that's okay. My last and final thing, we need to normalize mental health. But see, in our community, there are stigmas and stereotypes and judgment and shame that make talking and opening up about mental health challenges difficult. And even if it's not a mental health challenge, just talking about challenges in our community, period, can be difficult. It's hard when we come to church and we look and we think we know what's happening in everyone else's life. Oh, look, they have the perfect marriage. Oh, look, she just always looks so perfect. They live in the perfect neighborhood. And it's hard for us to come and be real about what we're really going through. Let me tell you, we can't be a healing community unless we are honest about what we need to be healed from. We are suffering. Our people are suffering. Our children are suffering. So we have to make changes around how we speak about mental health and how we relate to those who are suffering. For those of you who are struggling, I want you to know that I see you, that we see you. And I want to affirm today that you can be blessed and still stressed.
The blessing from God, the blessing that God gives, no man can take from you. Glory to God.